Now, Jung, I think it's time we visit the opposite end of the spectrum after Wii Sports Resort with one of the most heavy-duty games ever, ARMA II.
That's right. There once was a time when games like Counter-Strike represented realism. Nowadays, this seems ridiculous for a game where you can take a magnum bullet to the leg and still run at full speed. But you have to remember, this was off the back of games like Quake, where you could take a rocket to the head and still run at full speed.
Nowadays, there's a whole new realism, and leading the way is Bohemia Interactive, makers of the original Operation Flashpoint, and whose Australian branch make training programs for the local and US Army.
I think I'm on fire. Yeah, I'm on fire. Definitely in a bit of trouble.
Their latest game is ARMA II, and coupled with the upcoming Operation Flashpoint 2, it's a good time for fans of hardcore realism.
ARMA II classifies itself as a combat simulator rather than an FPS, and that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's one of those games where you have to read the manual before you do the tutorial.
Let's test you. Shoot as many targets as possible. If you want to quit, just drop your weapon or leave the station.
In the first few missions, there's a focus on special forces, and you'll usually be dumped a fair hike away from your actual mission.
To us, this was a bit of a learning experience. We like to think we're pretty good at shooters here at Good Game, but this game really puts in perspective how much time and planning and communication goes into even just a small-scale attack. One bullet can kill you, and chances are you won't see where it's coming from. And it's not rare to spend 10 minutes stalking one enemy for the kill.
Play to our front.
I'm hit.
Communication is still robotic, but very effective and very in-depth.
To engage that soldier.
This is I'm the new actual.
Squad mates are much more reliable than in other games, but every now and then they'll still do something stupid, like go prone in the middle of a road near an MG.
In parts of the game, you'll take direct control of your squad mates as well as giving them orders.
Driver, get in that car.
Roger.
And you'll use this to plan attacks, together with tricks like attacking with the sun behind you to reduce your enemy's visibility. Even later on, you'll use the map to command several squads.
Move 500 meters to our left.
Understood.
You'll also be controlling armor, piloting in the air, and parachute dropping, but most of your time will be spent planning that all-important first shot, which isn't so easy when bullet drop and travel time are in the equation.
Yeah, it's hard to get used to, you know. Games like Call of Duty, they pick those kind of realism moments and then stylize it.
At this distance, you'll also have to take the Coriolis effect into account.
Ooh, the Coriolis effect.
Target down.
Yeah, and that way it's great that games like ARMA exist. You know, they're kind of the pioneers in figuring out how to represent real combat with game mechanics and interface. You'll also be forced to make some hard decisions on the fly.
I'm not sure, Miles.
Come on, Coops. You can see the situation clearly. You've got to make this call. Is there any chance you can manually detonate without risking civilian casualties?
Moral choices in games are so hot right now, but as we've seen with games like Space Siege and Bioshock, unless they have a meaningful consequence and reflect somehow in the game's mechanics in a meaningful way, no one really cares.
Yeah, you know, I haven't met one person that actually cared about Bioshock's little sisters. It got me thinking, why did I care so much about the moral choices in ARMA II? I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but when I came across a huddled figure who told me she'd just been raped and tortured, I actually gave a crap.
Miles, they're abusing a female prisoner here.
Copy. What's the situation, Marine? Think you can extract them?
Of course, I didn't know at the time that these people would help me in return.
Můžete mi na mapě označit to místo?
Já myslím, zkusím to. Díky, Cooper, jsem v pořádku. Běžte.
Get back!
Evidence like this helps High Command justify your involvement in the region. But at first glance, game-wise, escorting civilians like this is just extra work. So what's so special about ARMA's moral choices that made me want to do the right thing every time?
Well, let's put it into context. It might take you about 20 minutes of sneaking around to get to this point, so if you're not in the moment by then, you've probably stopped playing. This sort of ultra-realism, ultra-punishing gameplay forces intensity on you. There's a lot at stake.
I think there's also an element of trust with the designers. I mean, they've spent a good deal of time by this point building up the story, which actually ends up being quite engaging, so you don't mind getting into it.
You okay, Marine?
Yes, sir. I've just never seen anything like it. Jesus Christ. There's a whole lot of dead civilians here.
Okay, Marine, get it together. Mark the position and move on to Madison. You okay?
Yeah, I got it. On my way. Out.
And you can tell that some of the voice acting was done by some Dexter in the studio. The game has its imperfections, but story, they do well.
And some of the stuff that's there is there on purpose that'll put most people off, like the way you walk is very clunky, but it is realistic. Other stuff, though, will bug everyone, like the mouse lag that's present no matter how good your computer is, or not being able to finish the tutorial because your trainer bugs out.
Graphically, ARMA is not impressive, but that's mainly due to the size of the conflict area, which is impressive. Multiplayer is included, and it features the same slow-paced, calculated ambushes with lots of bots.
These realistic war games typically have great communities behind them, full of people willing to make extras for the game. Just like the first ARMA II has a scenario editor, and I'm sure great things will come from it.
Well, Junk, how about we rate this like we did the last ARMA? You from a fan of hardcore realism, and me from a pure fun perspective.
Easy. ARMA II is at the extreme end of combat simulation. And even though there are a few things that'll annoy everyone, it's very good at what it does. And it's great that games are being made for the smaller, hardcore market. I'm giving it 9 out of 10 rubber chickens.
It captures the feel of Special Forces better than the last one, but I think there's a lot of hardcore shooter fans who'll try this and then after a few hours think, nah, I'll just go back to Call of Duty. I recommend trying the demo first. I'm giving it 6.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.